Thanks, Miriam, for the nice introduction. And welcome to my presentation about camera application development in special software. So where we peek into how to develop machine vision applications. When we talk about machine vision applications, we typically think about a camera, but it's not only the camera, but it's also the software behind. And if we talk about the camera, it's not necessarily only one camera, but it can be multiple cameras. So from what your application is, there come different things to consider, for example, bandwidth or synchronization, trigger or buffer handling when we talk about multiple cameras. But this is a vision application too. The software behind can differ. For example, you can have just a display for visual inspection. There we talk about auto brightness or color correction, free runs for 30 FPS or similar, gamma and things like that to optimize the visual experience of the camera image. On the other hand, applications can serve to control machines. And here, important facts are the triggering of the application, the processing time, jitter, or buffer handling. And all these facts not only rely to the camera, but also to the software behind. As Heiko already mentioned very nicely in his talk, the application decides, and that's basically the main fact. What's your application decides what features are necessary for your application. And it's not only the features, it's also speed or price of the camera or of the whole system. Not only the camera, also cable and the PC that's behind. But there are also other facts, like for example, image quality. Do you need high image quality, low noise level, or feature quality? How good must features be implemented? Do they have to be stable? Do they have to be fast? And last but not least, simplicity. How easy is it to realize your application and to make it real in your process afterwards? What does that mean for software? In terms of software, you need all tools that you need for to develop a tailored software solution, and this should all come from one source, so that you have just a single source and everything you need is included. A beneficial is standard compliant and hardware independent SDK because it enables you to switch faster, for example, to a new camera vendor or to switch between camera models. And also beneficial is a transparent modular SDK structure. We will come to that a little bit later. Of course, the supported platforms and programming languages are important, but these are typically predefined by your developing team because just a specific programming language is required, or the platform is predefined by your application. And to easily get into touch with an SDK, it samples for a quick start so that you can use them as copy-paste starting point. And last but not least, very important, it's the support from a support team that's very deep into the SDK. First point I want to mention a little bit more in detail is the transparent modular SDK structure. What do I mean with transparency? One of the points is the location of the algorithm. Where is the algorithm located? Is it in the camera? Is it the sensor or the firmware, FPGA? Or is it located in the software afterwards in your pixel pipeline that's processed by the CPU? Another important point is the error notification, so that you're in an early stage of your project notified by possible errors already during design phase, so that you can debug them and you can develop faster and get to a result as fast as possible. If we talk about the location of the algorithm, let's have an example for debayering. If we have color sensors, they usually come with a Bayer pattern, so that each pixel has only red, green, or blue, but not all three. Later in the application for display, we need all three on each pixel, so they have to be calculated somewhere. In our IDS Vision Cockpit, we can define for both locations what kind of pixel type we want to have. For example, we can define that the debayering is only done on the host side, so in the PC, or that the debayering is already done in the camera firmware. For both, we have these controls, so that user can already choose in the Vision Cockpit what application type he wants to serve. If we have a look at the processing pipeline, the raw image from the sensor goes through FPGA, is transferred into the image processing part on the host PC, and then the post-processing, for example, the display. First possibility is that we do the debayering in the FPGA. That means we calculate from, let's say, a one-plane raw image, a three-plane RGB image, which has 3 times the data than before. And this data we have to transfer, so it's 3 times 8-bit in this case, which means we have quite a lot of traffic. But for image processing, CPU does not have to do much. This use case is, for example, suitable for low frame rates or low processing power on the PC side, because the main processing power is featured by the camera. On the other hand, we can also move the debayering to the host side. And this is, for example, important if you have a camera that does not support debayering, or you need higher frame rates and thus a lower bandwidth on the line between camera and PC. So traffic is reduced, but CPU load is increased because the algorithm takes place now in the PC. This use case is beneficial, for example, for higher frame rates or multi-camera applications, especially when we talk about geeky vision. The second example I want to mention is binning. Binning is typically required if you have a noisy image or a low light level, so low brightness, and you want to decrease the noise level relative to your signal that you want to get from the image, so the image contents. With binning, you reduce resolution, and in some cases this is acceptable. For example, if you want to have a fast preview, or you have low light processes, price-sensitive applications. And if you do the binning on the host side, that's okay, but it increases, of course, CPU load, because you have to calculate everything on PC. On the other hand, if you move the binning algorithm to the FPGA, it increases your speed, because you only have to transfer, in case, for example, for a 2x2 binning, it decreases your resolution down to a fourth of the original resolution, and this gives you room for higher frame rates. So traffic is reduced. And last but not least, some sensors support binning as a sensor feature. And here also the frame rate can be increased even more, because the sensor delivers only a quarter of the image pixels to the FPGA. So the whole process after the sensor is sped up. Again, this is related to costs. You need to have a camera that supports spinning. You need to have a sensor that supports spinning. And these cameras can be more expensive. So software can be a solution for you to use spinning, although your camera doesn't support it, and nevertheless improve your noise level for your application. Let's come to error notification. With our IDS Peak, we have introduced some custom nodes, some custom features, not of the camera, but of the connection. For example, delivered frames are counted, underruns, incompletes, drop frames. These are general counters already available by standard, but we also introduced some USB or GigE specific counters, for example, about the stream pipe errors on the USB connection, or about the buffer fill level or resends for GigaVision. This allows you to monitor your connection very briefly already during design phase. And if there are any changes within these counters, you are notified. In this case, it's the logger in our Vision cockpit, but you always get a notification also if you're using the SDK or API. And this helps your development to speed up, to find possible sources of errors in an early phase. For example, if you have dropped frames, this can be due to bandwidth. In this case, it's a one-to-one connection, one camera, one PC. This camera, it's for example a GV5260CP running with 30 frames, and bandwidth is quite okay. It's 72.45 megabyte per second, and the connection to your PC allows 120. No problem in this case. But if you connect a second camera with 30 FPS, you're over the bandwidth, and the connection to the PC, because they're all connected to one switch, the connection to the PC will not be able to deliver all the data, and you will have incompletes. What can you do? You can reduce the bandwidth because it's a system design issue. It's not really an error, but your system is just not designed to deliver all this data. So you can reduce the frames per second, if that's acceptable for your application. Other possibilities would be to reduce region of interest, use binning, or other things that decrease your data that has to be transferred. In this case, it's just dropping the frame rate down to 24 frames per second, and you're okay with the bandwidth. If you're interested in this topic, we have a very nice tech tip on our website, Bandwidth Under Control, and please be referred to that document. Another important fact when developing software is the software modularity. Modularity in this case means that you can use the parts of the SDK that you need for your application and leave the others away. This supports agile development, and it requires a clean interface between the modules. In this case, for example, we have an IDS Peak API, and we have an IDS Peak IPL, which is the image processing library. This image processing library can be used standalone, so you don't need necessarily an application including all the other parts of the IDS Peak SDK. Third-party applications have different entry points. They can either use our transport layer, or they can directly communicate with the standard compliant devices. A typical use case would be, for example, the image capturing with one of our devices with UI plus firmware, buffer handling done by IDS Peak API, so receiving the camera images and buffering them for the further image processing, and the analytics or display or whatever you need to evaluate is done with a cockpit. This is a typical getting started situation. You connect the camera for the first time and just want to see how it works, or you want to evaluate if the sensor meets your requirements, or you want to find out the camera configuration. But you can replace the cockpit, which is a ready-to-use tool for you, by your custom application. This is typically the case when you do application development, or if you bring your developed application into a productive system. But it's also possible to use the buffer handling from the Peak API and use the IDS Peak IPL just to store images for a later asynchronous capture and processing application. And for this, also, of course, we also need the second part, which reads the image from a storage from the disk somewhere and does the analytics or display afterwards. So processing the stored images. It's also possible to use the IDS Peak API just for the buffer handling, and anything else after the image data is in the host PC is done by third-party applications or libs to realize your custom application. For example, if you're using OpenCV as an image library. Or, last but not least, you use the camera firmware directly connected to a third-party software, for example, Helken, Matrix Imaging Library, or LabVIEW. All in all, we have to say the application decides, be it hardware or software, be it camera or be it software feature in the host PC. And there are some challenges from today trends, like Carsten already presented in his talk very nicely, that also challenge the software behind. One of these cases are large frame rates or larger sensors with higher interface speeds, for example, for 10 gig E or USB evolutions. In this case, of course, speed matters the most. Features are also important, but price is typically of lower importance in this case. But what matters also is feature quality, because features have to be performant. They have to run with high speed, and they have to be very robust, so that they don't fail. And if you have a high cost system, typically image quality is also an important fact. So how can software help in this case? It can help with high performance features, fast features, stable features, to make your application process the high data rates that are required. Second application, low cost. Also trend of today's machine vision applications. In this case, the biggest issue is the price. Speed and features are of lower importance. But when we talk about price, it's also important that it's easy to implement your application, because the time that you spend on developing is also putting on the costs of your project. So price and simplicity, and also the features that you need for your application, because maybe the camera does not offer all the features that you need for your application. Software can help in this case, for example, by implementing the missing features of the camera inside the SDK, but also with the simplicity how you can implement them. We saw that machine vision applications consist of camera and software, and the software can support where the camera is maybe missing some aspects. We have a broad variety of application, and the application decides what you need as hardware, but also as software features. Transparency and modularity help you to develop a tailored application that's really tailored to your needs. And software solutions can solve current trends, issues, and help you even when price or speed are a challenge. Thanks for listening, and hope to see you in the next talk.